corporate world, and I talk to, major investors and boards and CEOs and founders of companies, incredibly hardworking, brilliant, focused people. And this sort of stuff never comes over their radar screen. And to me, that's a much bigger problem than the State Department bureaucracy, right? Because they're the folks who are making the investment decisions, the employment decisions, investing your money, right? And so in my current role, I'm spending a lot of time, on that segment of our population, just having conversations with them about what's actually going on.
Well, let's talk about the business side of things because it is easier in some ways to see the transnational repression and the influence on the political side or the government side because that is in some ways easier to expose than what happens in the business world. What do you think is happening now in the business world in regards to CCP influence?
Well, first of all, it is clear that the party has picked certain individuals to serve as their voices. Um, uh, the National Committee on China Relations, the Asia Society, um, certain think tanks, um, Jessica Chen Weiss at the Council on Foreign Relations, right? I mean, these are folks that get access to party members. Um, there's a reporter at the Wall Street Journal who basically repackages Chinese propaganda and puts it on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, never names their sources. I suspect it's the embassy in Washington, but it's essentially repackaged propaganda as a news story for one of our most important newspapers, my former employer. Um, so it's clear that certain individuals have been targeted, but equally as important, certain companies have been given licenses to produce and have built infrastructure in China that makes it very difficult for them to entirely pull out. Tesla, Apple, the ones that you all know. What's interesting to me is that Stevens is a smaller financial firm, and we're private. We've never invested in China. I have a deeply patriotic set of owners, very American patriots. And I asked them, why don't you invest in China? And he kind of laughed at me and he said, well, they don't have a rule of law or property rights. Like, why would I ever invest there? It's just common sense, right? So
Yeah.
our clients um, are are getting out, and you don't read about those stories because they're not the big Fortune 100 firms. But there is a huge exodus out of China, and you do, even the law firms, right, that were so gung ho about opening up offices, they never made money there. They're leaving. I don't think everyone has left Hong Kong. There's still this pretension that somehow Hong Kong is different. It's not. But that day will come. But what I tell our clients is, hey, look, what happened with Russia, where you had this massive corporate pullout and it all had to happen in like a matter of weeks. That could happen with China, and you better plan for that. I mean, I hope we don't get into a conflict, but if you want to be, a prudent steward of your company, you have to think about that. Got to plan for it.
What are the consequences of pulling out of China? Like, do you get like if you're one of your clients, so you're like a mid-size company, you're not a Fortune 100, but you decide you're going to pull everything out. You've got maybe physical resources. You've got staff who some of them are American, some of them might be local Chinese, and you want to get like, are you going to face punishment? Is the CCP going to try to nationalize your stuff that's still in China? Like, you lose everything?
Well, first, I want to be very clear. No American should be going to China. It's not safe. Not safe at all. And I talk to a lot of people who say, well, I'm just a mid level guy. They don't care about me. Who am I? No, wrong. The minute that you land at the airport, they are taking a record of you, your face, your gait, your weight, your phone, everything. It's a totalitarian state. And like, let's just take one example. Let's say you have another spy balloon fly over the United States, and the head of Shanghai says, go get an American, go get 10 Americans. He just grab you. I have no idea why anybody would go to China right now. I think it's crazy. Um, so anyway, but no, what are the consequences? Well, many companies don't say they're pulling out. They do it gradually. They do it very gradually, and it's very expensive and time consuming to change a supply chain. So if you're making some sort of electrical product or some complicated widget, you can't really do that immediately. You can't, and it's not easy to say, "Well, we'll just move to Vietnam." I mean, that's not easy either. So um, it's a tough ask for many companies, and many companies, rightly so, say, "Hey, I spent 25 years cultivating this workforce in China. I like these people. In fact, I love these people. They're part of our corporate family. We don't want to abandon them. We've given them really good incomes. We've given them the means to educate their kids. I mean, there's a personal connection there. So it's a tough decision for many companies. I get very frustrated when I flip on the TV and you see folks saying we should decouple tomorrow. We don't have any idea of how business actually operates. You just can't do that in many circumstances. You can if you're an investor, you can sell the asset if there's a buyer on the other side. But if you're manufacturing things, much harder.
So, how did the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act work? Because that required a lot of U.S. companies that had actual assets and manufacturing supply chains in China to determine if there's slave labor in their supply chain, particularly with Xinjiang cotton. And that was very difficult. And I know just recently, China sanctioned the company that owns like Tommy Hilfiger for not buying cotton from Xinjiang because they have to comply to U.S. law. And now they're under sanctions from Chinese crazy law. Like that seems to be a case where they had a very sudden impetus to get out and they had to move quick.
Good. What I say to a lot of folks is, you know what? You may not be as big of a company. Your margins may decline. But are you going to look like a genius in 5 years when there's this massive pullout and you're prepared? Or do you want to risk it? I mean, I don't have the answer for every company or every investor. They've got to make their own decisions. But what we can do is equip them to understand the nature of the regime, understand that the risk environment is only going to get more complicated. And just to go back to the point of our discussion today, that the information that they're getting from the Chinese side or from their Chinese friends that they've been sent to them by the party, should be taken with a big grain of salt because of these United Front operations that are, extensive, very extensive.
When you talk to people in the business world about these influence operations, these United Front operations, is it kind of like, oh, okay, this now makes sense, or is it kind of disbelief? What's the reaction?
Depends. I mean, you'd be surprised at how many different sorts of companies are exposed to the Chinese market. It could be selling chicken feet from Iowa, or electronics manufacturers in Michigan. Corning glass in New York. Wendell Weeks is the CEO is deeply embedded in China. I mean, he was one of the few CEOs that went to the Beijing summit. I mean, he's probably got folks crawling all over him. I like Wendell, but he's in a tough spot now. I think he needs to get out. But the reactions really vary. I had a dinner with a billionaire a couple of years ago, and he thought I was a kook. He essentially said, "You're paranoid. They're not out to get me. Everything will just be fine. It's just Trump. That was the problem. It'll all get better." I mean, look at the behavior. It hasn't gotten better, and it won't get better, because all you have to do is look at the trajectory of the activities and to look at what they say to their own people. And again, at some point, these operations and the extent of them are going to get exposed, and everyone will be very surprised.
What advice would you give Elon Musk, or have you actually talked with him?
Oh no, I haven't talked with him. I'd love to talk with him. Well, one of his businesses is deeply reliant on manufacturing in China. I can't speak for him. I don't know what he's thinking. I would presume that he doesn't love the idea of being dependent on such a unpredictable regime with so few rights. Um, I don't know. I don't know how he's going to handle this going forward. But it is unhelpful more broadly that we do not have any prominent US CEO coming out and saying the things that I'm saying. And part of that reason is because they don't want the attention. They don't want that to be accused of being somehow against Chinese Americans. And that would happen, right? They would get attacked partially because of Chinese United Front operations, right? Messing in our social media and feeding, reporters that kind of information. So they don't want to be politically attacked. They get compensated on short-term incentives. I'm on a couple comp committees of companies. You set up short-term incentives, but some of them just get paid a certain amount of stock every year just for sitting in the chair. But they also have long-term incentives. They're dependent on the stock price or EBITDA or some measure. They don't want to endanger that. They don't want stock price to go down. They don't want customers to flee. And they don't have top cover. They don't have, again, the US government saying, you guys got to get out. Now, I wish we had really patriotic CEOs. Many of them are actually deeply patriotic. But these are practical considerations that they're all thinking through. But it is kind of crazy. There isn't a single one